This is a PowerPoint presentation prepared by the Office of State Comptroller, Retirement Services Division. This PowerPoint presentation is for members of Tier 2 or Tier 2A who will be retiring before July of 2022 under an early or normal retirement. This presentation does not cover every minute detail, but rather is a general explanation of the most important considerations a member will be making if they were going to retire in the near future. The goal of this video is to provide the same information in this setting we provide in our traditional counseling sessions. It's important to note that this is not meant to cover every retirement provision or detail, but rather is a general explanation of the most important retirement issues and considerations. Each slide in this presentation also has a voice recording. These slides should not be viewed unless they also have the retirement counselor's recording to each slide. During this presentation, we're going to talk about the retirement benefit calculation. We're going to discuss survivor options. We're going to talk about the retirement process, and we'll have a conversation about health insurance. First, we're going to discuss the retirement benefit calculation. To qualify for a monetary retirement benefit, you must have met both the minimum age and minimum service requirements. To retire under an early retirement, you must be at least 55 years old and have a minimum of 10 years of vesting service. As long as that has been met, you may retire the first of any month on or after reaching this requirement. When you retire, your monetary benefit will be calculated using a formula that uses how much service credit you had with the state, your final average salary for your 3 highest years of pay, and your age to determine if you're retiring under an early or normal retirement. Let's start talking about the different factors that are used to calculate your retirement benefit. But first, let's start the discussion with service credit. Service credit totals are used to determine your eligibility to retire, and it's used to determine what your monetary benefit will be. There are 3 different types of service credit. There's actual state service, there's vesting state service, and there's credited state service. Actual state service and vesting state service are used to determine your eligibility to retire. Another service credit total is your credited service, and that's what's used to calculate your monetary benefit. Service credit includes all state employment, provided the period of service is not succeeded by a permanent break, was in a pension-eligible position, and if you're in a contributory plan, you pay retirement contributions and they remained in the system. If you're out on workers' comp, and the workers' comp you received was for lost wages, that also counts as state service. When you leave state service, you may also have vacation time accruals remaining. You'll get paid for that time, and that counts as additional service credit. I note that some state employees are limited to 60 days vacation. See your agency regarding any questions on your vacation payout. If you participate in a voluntary schedule reduction program, as long as it's properly identified, this will also count as service credit. And then we treat furlough days the same way as the voluntary schedule reduction program. These both don't count against you. We adjust your rate as if you worked those days. Lastly, if you have purchase time such as prior military or qualifying unpaid FMLA or maternity leave, this would also count as service credit. Excluded from your service credit is any non-qualifying leave of absence without pay, and any workers' comp you receive not for lost wages, but for a specific indemnity award called permanency payments. Those do not count for retirement purposes. Those are just monies that you would receive as a reward for the injury that you had. If you have had part-time service, let's talk about how that works. For determining if you're eligible for a retirement benefit, first we're going to ignore that you were part-time and use your date-to-date service to determine your eligibility to retire. However, when we calculate your monetary benefit, we will adjust your credited service to reflect the full-time equivalent that you actually worked. Let me give you an example. If an employee worked for 10 years of service at a 50% schedule, when we calculate their eligibility, we'll use the 10 years of date-to-date service that they were employed. But when we calculate their monetary benefit, we will adjust the 10 years of service credit to reflect the 50% schedule they actually worked, which would equate to 5 years, 50% of the 10 years that they were employed. Now I want to continue on our conversation about the benefit formula and talking about how this benefit is calculated. We've been talking about the service credit that's used to calculate the retirement. I now want to talk about the average salary, because average salary is a big part of this formula. When we calculate your average salary, we're looking for any 3 periods of 12 consecutive months of your highest earnings. These don't necessarily have to be your last 3 years of employment. They don't necessarily have to be consecutive or calendar years. They just have to be 12-month periods, 3 different times in your career that are higher than anywhere else in your career while you're employed by the state. Now, it's important to note that there are some limitations we must take into consideration when we calculate your average salary. Some of these limitations are actually a little complex to explain in this brief summary. You can actually find more detailed information on these topics on our website. The first limitation I would like to explain is called the 130% cap. What that means is that when we identify each of your 12-month blocks, that answer cannot exceed 130% of the average of the 2 years that came before it. If that answer is more than 130% of that average, we would have to cap that 12-month block. This typically happens if someone has recently had a large promotion or dual employment during that 12-month block we want to use for your average salary. It's important to note that when we're calculating the 130% cap, we have to ignore overtime. So if this 12-month block is higher than the 2 years that came before it, and that was because this 12-month block has more overtime in it, we can ignore overtime when we're determining the 130% cap. The next cap we have to measure is called the 150% cap, which became effective in July of 2014 as part of the 2011 CBAC agreement. This works very similar to the 130% cap, except it is measuring overtime. That is, that when we determine each of your 12-month blocks, that answer cannot exceed 150% of the 2 years that came before it when we include overtime. Last, each 12-month block is also limited to the IRS compensation limit. The IRS has a compensation limit for each calendar year. For example, in 2018, that was $275,000. In 2020, that is $285,000. And what this means is that if you are a high wage earner and that 12-month block exceeds either $275,000 or $285,000 or some number in between, depending on the year that we're looking at, you'd be limited to that amount. So going back to the benefit formula, you're entitled to 1.4% times your average salary up to the breakpoint. What is the breakpoint? Well, the breakpoint is a number as assigned by state statute and is part of the benefit formula. The breakpoint increases 6% a year, but is subject to a cap. 2015 was the first year that the breakpoint and future years were capped. We're estimating that future years are increasing about 3.5%, and it's all based on the Social Security taxable wage base that comes out for every single year. The cap is actually is the 35-year average over the last 35 years of Social Security taxable wage base. So it's hard to necessarily know what future breakpoints would be capped at until Congress or Social Security identifies what the future year's breakpoint will be. Therefore, the actual breakpoint used in your retirement is going to be calculated by retirement plan actuaries when you retire. The retirement plan actuaries were actually the ones who identified that we should be estimating a 3.5% increase based on looking over the last 35 years of the Social Security taxable wage base. Again, this could change depending on what each year's Social Security taxable wage base would be. So let me draw your attention again to the actual benefit formula. You're entitled to 1.4% times your average salary up to the breakpoint. If you had any earnings that exceeded the breakpoint, you're entitled to 1.83% of that. We add these numbers together and we come up with the final answer, and this answer is then going to be multiplied by your by the years and months of credited service that you have. We use years and full calendar months. In my example, he had 32 years and 4 months of credited service. To calculate this, it's pretty simple. 4 months is 0.333% of a year. And we do that math and we come up with the yearly and then divide it by 12 monthly benefit. Now, if you're already at normal retirement age, and that's pretty simple, if you're retiring before July of 2022, your normal retirement age is age 60 if you have 25 or more years of vesting service. If you have less than 25 years of vesting service, then your normal retirement age is age 62. If you're not age 60 with 25 or more years of service, or you're not age 62, then you're retiring early, and your retirement is going to be permanently reduced for every month you're retiring before your normal retirement age. That's 6% a year, which equates to 0.5% for every single month you retire early. If you retire early, we take your monthly benefit and we multiply it by how many months you're retiring early. That would come up with the monthly benefit, which we've rounded in this particular example, and yearly benefit. If you're retiring early, it will be notated at the top of your estimate sheet, identifying whether this is an early or normal retirement. If your retirement date is before July of 2022, you're going to receive a COLA once a year. It's going to be either January 1st or July 1st. It's all based on when you retire. The cost of living adjustment will range between 2% to a maximum of 7.5%. It's all based on a formula that could take into consideration the consumer price index for urban wage earners. I can tell you that formula goes back to the late 1990s, and from the 1990s all the way to the present, almost every single cost of living increase we've calculated has been the minimum COLA. So we generally tell people to plan the 2% COLA going forward. You have to retire at least 9 months to qualify for your first cost of living adjustment. Here is an example of cost of living adjustments for retirement dates between May of 2020 and April of 2021, when they would receive their first COLA. That's the date they receive their first COLA, and that's the date that they receive an annual COLA going forward. If they qualify for July COLA, then it's every July thereafter they receive this cost of living increase. If it's a January COLA, it's January going forward. The next thing I'd like to talk about in our presentation is survivor options. One of the most important decisions you'll make after you decided to retire is choosing a survivor option. There are 4 different survivor options, and you'll need to choose one of them when you're filling your retirement paperwork out with your agency. It's important to remember 3 things when you're choosing your survivor option. The first thing is, once you elect a survivor option, you can never change it in the future. So if you take a survivor option for someone, and later in life, that person passes away before you, or you go your separate ways, you don't ever want to talk to them again, they retain a right to your benefit. You can never take them off. You can never replace them with someone else. So it's important to understand that as you start going through these options. The second thing I'd like to talk about with the survivor options is health insurance. Now, you, the retiree, as long as you're alive, will receive a monthly benefit, and as long as you qualified for retiree health insurance, you'd be able to continue to provide health insurance to your eligible dependents. However, at the time of your death, no health insurance will continue to be paid unless you chose a survivor option that has money continue to be paid after your death, and the individual receiving that survivor option was an eligible dependent at the time of your death, in which case they would continue to receive health insurance as long as they had a dependent eligibility status. And the last thing, as we talk about these survivor options, we're talking about how these apply to the survivor. It's important to understand that you, the retiree, get a lifetime benefit regardless of the option you choose. What we're talking about, again, is what happens after your death. Does money continue to be paid after your death? Does it get paid for a specific period of time? Or does it get paid for the rest of that person's life? But you'll understand that more as we go through these options. So let's begin. I wanted to show you this slide to assist us in illustrating how retirees benefit amount would be adjusted under the different survivor options. This example comes from our retirement benefit estimators available on the Comptroller's website. To calculate the survivor options, we either use the age you, the retiree, are closest to at the time you retire and the age that your optionee is closest to when you retire. Your individual numbers will be different than my illustration because for this illustration, I'm going to use a retiree that was closest to age 58, an optionee that was closest to 57, and assume the retiree's straight life annuity benefit is $4,300 a month. We're going to cover in this presentation each of the survivor options and refer back to this slide to use the illustration of how this retiree's benefit is being adjusted under the different options. The first option we're going to discuss is option D, the straight life annuity option. This is the maximum benefit that you would be able to receive at your retirement. And how this option works is that you, the retiree, will receive a benefit for your lifetime only. As long as you're alive, you receive the maximum benefit. As long as you're alive, you also, if you qualified for health insurance, continue to receive health insurance for your life and any of your eligible dependents. At the time of your death, however, all payments stop, including any health insurance for any of your eligible dependents. If you were in a contributory plan, and all our plans now are contributory, if you passed away before the money that you've contributed to the retirement plan has been exhausted, then there'll be a one lump sum refund of those contributions. But that's it. There really is nothing paid after your death under a straight life annuity option. One last thing, your eligible dependents could elect to use COBRA under federal law. I think it's 3 years that they could receive COBRA benefits, but that would be the limited amount of time that they'd be able to receive health insurance under this option. Looking back at our example, the lifetime annuity would be the first monthly amount shown under our survivor option example. In this example, my retiree received the full amount that was calculated from the benefit formula. The next option we're going to discuss is option A, the 50% spouse option. How this option works is that your benefit would be reduced. The reduction is based on the age that you, the retiree, are closest to and the age your spouse is closest to at the day of your retirement. Your benefit would be reduced to provide at the time of your death, if your spouse was to outlive you, your spouse would start receiving half of what your benefit was for the rest of his or her lifetime. As long as you're alive, you receive a benefit, and at the time of your death, the benefit would continue to be paid at half, 50%, to your spouse. While you're alive, if you qualified for retiree health insurance, you're continuing to provide health insurance to your eligible dependents, and at the time of your death, if you're still married and your spouse was still an eligible dependent, your spouse would also continue to receive health insurance at the time of your death for as long as your spouse would have eligibility status. The last thing to talk about under this option is that this is actually the automatic option if you've been married for more than a year. You could choose another option if you wish to do so, but if you're not choosing an option that provides a lifetime benefit to your spouse, then you'll need your spouse's permission, and there's a form your spouse would have to fill out. In the survivor option factor box below, you will see the 50% annuitant option. You can see what the member's monthly benefit would be there. And next to it, we've shown you what the 50% spouse or annuitant option would be as well. The next option we're going to discuss is option B, the 50 or 100% survivor option. It's also called the contingent annuitant option. And basically how this works is that if you elected this option, you would have to choose at the time of your retirement whether you're choosing a 50 or 100%. And how it would work is that your benefit would be reduced, and you receive that reduced amount for your lifetime. At the time of your death, the person that you named would either receive 50 or 100% of your benefit for the rest of their lifetime. Now, while you're alive, if you qualify for retiree health insurance, you continue to receive health insurance for as long as you're alive and for your eligible dependents. At the time of your death, if the person you named was to outlive you, then they would start receiving this monetary benefit. And if they were an eligible dependent, they met the eligibility rules for retiree health insurance, then they continue to receive health insurance for as long as they continue to have eligibility status. Now, when I mention survivor or contingent annuitant, it's important to recognize that you're not required under this option to choose your spouse. You can name any one person to receive a benefit. You can use this to provide a benefit to your spouse, but you could also do it to a niece or a nephew, a son or a daughter, your favorite neighbor if you wish to do so. You just have to identify who that person is when you're retiring and filling out your paperwork. As I mentioned previously, if you are married for at least a year and you are choosing a survivor option for someone other than your spouse will have to sign off on that. And under this option, you can name only one person, and as we've said before, it can never be changed. This is the box where you'd also see where the 100% benefit would be. What we're showing you here is what you, the retiree, would receive from day one. As you can see, it's further reduced from day one to provide at the time of your death, the person that you named would receive 100% of that amount for the rest of their lifetime. This is the amount your survivor would receive after your death. However, I should note that there is an IRS regulation that would further limit the amount payable to your named contingent annuitant if you are electing this option for a non-spouse that's more than 10 years younger than you. The next option I would like to discuss is option C, the 10 or 20-year period is certain option. These work a little differently than the options we've been previously discussing, so let me explain how these work. You, the retiree, would have to choose at the time of your retirement whether you're electing a 10 or 20-year period certain. And how this would work is that you would start receiving a benefit for your lifetime, however long you live. At the time of your death, we're going to take a snapshot and look to see exactly how long did you live. Because under this option, we're making a promise that a minimum of 10 or 20 years of payments will be paid. So let's use an example. Say you, the retiree, elect a 10-year period certain, and you live 6 years into retirement. If you pass away 6 years into a 10-year period certain, the remaining 4 years must be paid to whomever you identified, and we would continue to pay whoever you identified for those remaining 4 years. Then the 10-year mark had arrived. If you were no longer alive, we would no longer have to pay payments. Let's use that same example, but say that retiree took a 10-year period certain and lived 30 years into retirement. It's important to recognize, as I said earlier, all these options are talking about how it applies to the survivor. So if you live 30 years into retirement, we don't care. We promise to pay you a benefit for your lifetime. It's just at the time of your death, if you took a 10-year period certain and you lived 30 years into retirement, we've obviously satisfied our 10-year promise, and so no one else would get paid after your death. Health insurance works the same way. As long as you're alive and qualified for retiree health insurance, you'd continue to continue to provide health insurance to your eligible dependents for as long as you're alive. Under a 10-year period certain, if you've passed away, as long as there's still time left on that period, then only for that remaining period of time where a benefit is being paid would any eligible dependent that you named continue to receive health insurance. So what this also means is that at the time of your death or after the period of time expired, whichever comes later, the person you named, if they were an eligible dependent for retiree health insurance, would stop receiving retiree health insurance. The only way they would be able to continue health insurance would be under COBRA, and that's for a minimum of 10 or limited to 3 years. Please refer to the payment option election box under the 10-year period certain to see that example. Please refer to the payment option election box for the 20-year period certain example. While we're talking about survivor options, it's important to recognize that if you are already eligible for retiree benefit and you've been married for at least a year, your spouse may already be protected, even if you don't live to retirement. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the pre-retirement death benefit. Under the pre-retirement death benefit, if you were to die while you're actively employed or on a approved leave of absence, your spouse would receive a monthly pre-retirement death benefit even if you never filled retirement paperwork out before. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about someone who was actively employed or on approved leave of absence and never filled retirement paperwork and unexpectedly passed away. If that person was eligible for an early, normal, or hazardous duty retirement, or if they had 25 years of service at any age, and as long as they've been married to their spouse for at least the 1-year period immediately before their death, then we assume the retiree's dying breath was that they elected a 50% option for their spouse. And how it would work is that, again, you never filled retirement paperwork out before, you pass away, all these requirements are met, your spouse has this protection. So for your peace of mind, if you're already eligible to retire or have 25 years of service and been married for at least a year, this protection is already in place. You don't have to fill the retirement paperwork out. There's just something for your peace of mind to know that this is already in existence. So if you continue to work and something happens to you and you meet all these requirements, we assume that your dying breath is you elected a 50% option for your spouse. Another thing I'd like to talk about is something we call the 90-day protection clause. The way the 90-day protection clause works is that if you elect a survivor option under option B or option C, the law protects the choice that you made for the 90 calendar days after you made that election or your date of retirement, whichever occurs first. This is a one-time protection. Therefore, you should not sign your retirement option form unless you're 90 calendar days before your retirement date. Let's talk again how this works. In this example, we have a retiree who's made the decision to retire, and they've started filling retirement paperwork out. But the retirement paperwork they filled out was for option B or option C. And for some reason, they pass away before they actually meet their retirement date. As long as they never filled retirement paperwork out before, and the paperwork is not more than 90 days old, we're going to honor the option that they elected. Generally, we see this happen, unfortunately, a lot with disability retirements. A lot of times, unfortunately, a state employee may have went to their doctor and got some bad news and found out they have a terminal condition and they don't have long to live. It's important that they would go to Human Resources and fill their retirement paperwork out so that if they didn't make it to their retirement date and they've already met the requirements, of course, to retire, or they elect to go under disability retirement, we will honor the option that they elected even if they don't live to their first retirement date. We've talked about it quite a bit through this presentation, but I want to reiterate how health insurance works. If you, the retiree, qualify for retiree health insurance, you would continue to receive health insurance for as long as you're alive. However, no one else would receive health insurance after your death unless you provide a survivor option for them, and only for as long as they're receiving a benefit is being paid. If the benefits stop after a certain period of time, or they're no longer meet the eligibility requirements for retiree health insurance, then the health insurance would stop. Now's a good opportunity to talk about some miscellaneous information to consider with your retirement. First thing, let's talk about the state's group life insurance policy. If you're working for the state and you have the state's group life insurance policy, let me use the example of the $38,000 policy. Typically, you're paying $7.60 biweekly to have that in force. If you were to die as an active employee, $38,000 would be paid to whoever you identified as your beneficiary of your life insurance policy. But what happens when you retire? Well, if you directly transition into retirement and you have 25 years or more of actual state service, then without having to pay another dime, at the time of your death, whomever you identified would receive a paid-up policy of one half of the original coverage. So if you had 25 years of service, and say you had a $38,000 policy, at the time of your death, $19,000 would be paid to your beneficiaries, whoever you identified, to receive that life insurance policy. If you have less than 25 years of service, we prorate that to reflect the schedule you actually worked. It's important to understand, however, that during the first 31 days of your retirement, and you'll get lots of letters from the retirement division when you retire, one of them will be from our life insurance unit, letting you know that you can convert your remaining portion back to the original amount if you wish to do so without evidence of insurability. Some people may find that to be a great benefit if they have a serious health condition and evidence of insurability may be an issue. Some other individuals may find that they have other life insurance policies that work better for them. You'll just have to make that decision when you retire. Let's talk about deferred compensation. If you've been participating in deferred comp, and right now the party that administers that for the state of Connecticut is Prudential, you're going to want to have a conversation with them because there's things you're going to want to do with their money, with the money that you've put into that down the road. Some individuals may also have payouts that are coming to them, like vacation or sick, that they may be interested in rolling into their deferred comp. There are limits and requirements for that, and you're going to want to talk to the deferred comp folks several months before your retirement if that's something that you're looking into doing. It's important to know that when you retire, you will not be able to take retirement benefits and continue to put it into deferred comp. That's not allowed by IRS regulations. Withholding tax. Everything we've talked about in our presentation and in our estimates are before taxes. You will pay taxes on your pension. You'll pay federal tax and you will pay state tax depending on the state that you're living in when you retire. If you're living in Connecticut, we do have an income tax and you should fill out the tax forms for that. If you do not and you're living in Connecticut, we have to withhold the standard default rate of 6.99% from your retirement check for Connecticut withholding, unless you've filled out a form telling us a different amount to withhold. If you live in another state that has an income tax, we will not be able to withhold that for you, and you're going to need to make arrangements with that state to make those payments. When you decide to retire, the first thing you want to do is let your agency know, and you want to give them enough notice so they can complete the retirement paperwork for you. You want to let your human resources or payroll know. You want to let your supervisor know, and keep a copy of this letter saying you're retiring for your records. You want to give them a minimum of 60 and no more than 90 days notice. You're going to be required to provide documentation to the Retirement Services Division. You need to provide your birth certificate. If you're taking an option, a copy of their birth certificate, and if you're married, a copy of your marriage certificate. We do not need official stamps or seals. Photocopies are just fine. Your agency will provide the additional retirement forms for you to complete. Vacation, sick, and longevity payments. What we're talking about here is the payout you receive when you retire from the state. As an active employee, when you leave state service, you get a payout of all the vacation time you left on the books, subject to, of course, your collective bargaining agreement, or if you're a manager, on the maximum that's allowed to be paid to a manager. Sick time, you get a quarter of your sick leave balance to a maximum of 60 days, and that's assuming you're directly transitioning into retirement. If someone left state service before directly transition to retirement, they do not get the sick payout. Same thing with longevity. If you qualify, if you still get longevity payments, you'll get one final longevity payment when you retire. If you left in April, October, you would get the full longevity that would have been paid on that month. If you retire a different month, you'll get a prorated amount towards the longevity that you've actually earned. Let me give you an example. If you left in March, you would get 5/6 of the full one that you would receive if you left in April. How retirement benefits are paid. Let's talk about how retirement is paid. Well, first, your retirement checks are going to be paid once a month. You receive a check once a month at the end of the month. And your check will either be a paper check, or if you sign up for direct deposited. If you do direct deposit, instead of getting mail each month with your advice in it, you would get one in January and one in July. There's also a Core CT portal for retirees where you'll be able to log in and see your check advices whenever you wish to do so. When you retire, you're going to have to reapply for your monthly deductions, which are currently limited to retiree unions, credit unions, and the Campaign for Charitable Giving. Other deductions that you may have signed up with at your agency, we can no longer continue to do so when you come over to the retirement payroll. One of the common ones is MetLife Auto and Home. There may have been some other life insurance policies that you sign up for at one of these fairs that your agency does. Again, you're going to have to talk to those companies to find another way to make those payments. The audit process. The retirement auditors are the ones who are going to calculate your retirement. They're going to put you on the payroll immediately, so you'll get a check at the end of the first month of your retirement, and that'll be your preliminary benefit. The first month that you retire is usually a great month because that's the month that all the final paychecks from your agency are going to be paid to you, including the last check from your agency, which will have a fraction of the days that you worked into until you retired, and any payouts for vacation, sick, and longevity that are due to you. And then the last check that month, of course, will be your first retirement check from the retirement division, and that's the month you have to budget on a monthly cycle going forward. The retirement auditors are going to go through your record one final time to do a permanent benefit update. If it takes them more than 6 months to do that, they'll pay you 5% interest on whatever they withheld after the first 6 months. I should note that we are doing everything we can, and we're pretty close to making sure the majority of state employees get their permanent benefit update within the 6 months of their retirement. There are a couple pension limitations we'd like to discuss. First, we'd like to discuss reemployment after retirement. If you decide that retirement life is not for you and you're bored and you want to go back to work, you can do so. If you get a job with a Connecticut state agency, you can continue to receive your retirement check and the money that you're receiving from this other job, as long as you're working as a temporary employee and you're not working more than 120 days in a calendar year. If you get a permanent job with a Connecticut state agency, that's okay too. You just have to let us know, because with a permanent employment, your retirement check must end. You go back in the retirement plan that you left. You accrue additional retirement credit to go towards that same retirement benefit you're receiving in the future. If you get a job that's not with a Connecticut state agency, we have no limitation at all. You continue to receive your retirement check and whatever you're earning from the other employment. Another limitation we'd like to discuss concerns workers' comp, specifically 5142A benefits. Now, if a person is getting 5142A benefits, generally we will not see them retire, because if they're actively employed, they're continuing to accrue retirement credit. It's another reason we usually don't see a person apply if they're still receiving these payments, is because if it's a non-disability retirement, they cannot receive a 5142A benefit and a retirement benefit at the same time. We're just letting you know because there's been situations where an individual may have re-aggravated an injury after retirement and workers' comp started up again. We want you to let us know if workers' comp starts up again after you retire, because it's important to identify it at the beginning to ensure there's no overpayment being made. For those of you who wish to do an estimate of what your benefit would be when you retire, we have a very helpful retirement estimator on the Comptroller's website. On the Comptroller's website, we have some very helpful tools to assist you with your retirement planning. I would like to draw your attention to the Tier 2 and 2A tools on our website. There you will find a lot of useful tools, including our workshop, which is almost verbatim what we discussed today, as well as the retirement benefit estimators. If you clicked on the Estimate Your Own Benefit, you'll be brought to this screen. It's an input screen. This is where you would need to input your own information to calculate your retirement. You put in your date of birth, the date of your survivor's date of birth if you want to see what survivor option numbers would be. You would type in what you expect to have as an average salary, when you plan on retiring, and how many years of service you'll have at that time. With that information, you would receive an estimate that tells you what your benefit would be, how many years of service, and how it equates to a monetary benefit. It would also provide you the traditional survivor options. This is a very helpful tool, especially if you're trying to determine what your benefit would be under the different survivor options. Last, the estimator will also show you the math that was used to calculate the monetary benefit. Your continued health insurance benefits are another important consideration in your retirement journey. If you qualify for continued health insurance benefits, you'll be given the opportunity to elect your health insurance benefit options when completing your retirement paperwork. As a retiree, you are provided the same medical, dental, and prescription benefit plan coverage options that you had as an active employee, the only difference being the cost of coverage deducted from your pension check. Your monthly health insurance premium will be dependent on whether you're retiring under an early or at normal retirement age, and whether you have 25 years of service. Once enrolled, you are not locked into the plan option you select when you first retire. You may switch plans or add or drop dependents each year during annual open enrollment or following a family status change, such as you can today. It's important to note that if you or one of your enrolled dependents is eligible for Medicare, you must enroll in Medicare Parts A and B as soon as you're able to do so. You are generally eligible for Medicare when you turn 65, but may be eligible sooner if you're permanently disabled. Once enrolled in Medicare, you must provide the retiree health insurance unit with a copy of your Medicare ID card in order to avoid a gap in coverage. You'll be automatically enrolled in the state's custom Medicare Advantage plan and will be eligible for a reimbursement of your Medicare premiums. It's important not to enroll in any other Medicare plan as it may disrupt your state benefits. One last item to consider regarding health insurance benefits after retirement is your survivor option. We've previously discussed your options for continued payment benefits after you should pass. Health benefits eligibility follows that payment. As long as the payment is continued to be paid to an eligible dependent, the health and benefits will continue with it. When the survivor option payment ceases, so will the health benefit. Your selected survivor may continue the health insurance benefits so long as they have been eligible to be enrolled under the coverage with you. For more information, including the current cost for retiree health coverage, benefit plan options, and Medicare details, please visit the state's specific Healthcare Compass website available at carecompass.ct.gov/retirees. On the screen here is our sources of information which we think could be helpful for individuals who may still have additional questions. On the Comptroller's website, we have retirement workshops, benefit estimators, summary plan descriptions, more health insurance information. A lot of the questions you may have should be able to be answered through our website. Some people may also find helpful information on Social Security, the IRS or Connecticut Revenue Services. And if you have deferred comp, we recommend you would call the deferred comp carrier, which is Prudential, to ask them questions about that as well. Now, on behalf of the Retirement Division, I want to congratulate you on your future retirement and hope that this presentation was helpful to you in answering your retirement questions. Have a good day.